Today's lecture is about thresholding. So thresholding is a way to segment images. Basically, we want to label pixels as belonging to one of two or more classes. So we're segmenting usually based on intensity. So this is an example of a histogram with two very separate modes, and we can find a threshold that would classify all the pixels less than the threshold as group 1 and all the pixels greater than threshold as group 2. Or we might have a situation where we want to segment the image into 3 regions, in which case we would have 2 thresholds that would separate those pixels. So in a simple example, this image has a histogram that has 2 very distinct peaks. Easy to find a threshold somewhere between them that would separate, and this is the binary image as a result of doing that thresholding. Several algorithms to do this. This is a simple algorithm, heuristic algorithm, that uses an iterative method. So we select an initial guess for the threshold, segment the image using that threshold into 2 groups. Group 1 with pixels greater than t, group 2 is pixels with intensities less than or equal to t. We compute the averages for the 2 groups and set the new threshold as the value midway between those 2 averages. And then repeat these steps, repeat steps 2 through 4 until there's no more change. And an advantage of this is that you can use the histogram to do all this, because you can find the mean just using the probability distribution. Here's a simple program that does that. We read in the image, get the histogram, convert the histogram to probability PMF function by dividing by the number of pixels. Here's our iterative loop. We start with an initial guess for the threshold. This expression in MATLAB creates a logical mask of all the intensity values that are greater than t. So it has a 1 for those and a 0 for the others. And then we can use that mask to compute the, to extract only the values of x such that that mask is true, and the values of p such that mask is true. So this expression is computing the mean of group 1, taking each value of x, the intensity, times the corresponding probability of that intensity, and then dividing by this normalization here. We do the same thing for group 2. Here's our computing of the midpoint between the 2 means, and then we can break out of here if there's no further changes. So let me run this. Oops. Copy that. Okay. Okay, so we read in the cameraman image. This is the histogram of the cameraman image. We started, remember, with an initial guess of the threshold as 128. So the sequence of iterations went from 128 to 108, 95, etc., finally stopping at 88.5, which is about right here. And another example of an image that's segmented using this simple algorithm. We can actually do better than this, though. There's an optimal algorithm that wants to minimize the error of misclassification. So imagine that you had 2 groups, two peaks in your probability distribution, and if you knew the probability profile of group 1 and of group 2, then choosing a threshold, say here, would mean that you would misclassify some points of group 1. And this would be the total probability of that misclassification. Similarly, we would misclassify groups or some pixels in group 2 that happen to fall below the threshold. So we want to minimize that total error of classification. Although we don't know the PDFs in advance, we can do a pretty good job by just minimizing the variance within the groups. So take a threshold, for example, compute the variance of the points in that group, call it sigma 1 squared, and then the other group, call it group 2, its variance is sigma 2 squared. So we want those two groups to be as tight as possible. So if I chose the threshold correctly, then the two variances of the two groups will be minimized. Or equivalently, you can show that this is the same thing as maximizing the variance between the groups with this expression. And don't forget, we have to normalize by the total probability of the points in group 1 and group 2. So basically just summing the p's in those two groups. So this is actually used in MATLAB's gray thresh function. And it tends to give better results than that basic heuristic algorithm. So this is an image with a histogram, and this is the result of thresholding with the basic algorithm. This is the result with the optimal algorithm called the Atsu algorithm. So let me run this. So I'll run gray thresh, and this returns a value of 0.341, and that, however, is normalized between 0 and 1. So if I want the actual gray level pixel intensity, I would need to multiply that by 255. So that computes a threshold of 88, which is similar to what I had before of well, I had 88.5. And this shows the result of finding the within group variances for this image, plotting for each threshold the within group variances, and we can see that it achieves a minimum at right here, I guess 114. We can also generalize the Atsu method to find multiple thresholds. If we want to segment the image, let's say, into 3 regions, we maximize the between class variance for all of the regions like this. We can also handle cases where the image has a gradient of illumination or reflectance across it. In that case, a single global threshold won't work. Take this image here. It's has a histogram that looks like this, but as you can see, it is darker on the left and brighter on the right here. So if we were to use a global threshold, either the iterative algorithm or the Atsu method, you can see that we have mistakes in this segmentation. However, if we compute the threshold for sub-images separately, then that is insensitive to this gradual intensity change across the image, and we get the correct segmentation. Finally, I'd talk about another type of segmentation, not using intensities, but could be any property really. For example, color or texture. So the idea is we partition the image into connected regions. We evaluate a property, usually of a property of the neighborhood of that region, and then we split regions that where that property is not satisfied, and we merge regions that are satisfied or mutually consistent. And we repeat that until no further change is possible. So, for example, take this image here. We have a bright area and a dark area, but a portion of the dark area has this speckle pattern. So let's say we were trying to segment out this region of the speckle. So we could define a property of this region that would be true if the variance of that region is above a certain value. So it has a high variance and it has a low average intensity. So we have the logical AND of those two conditions. So if we perform the split and merge technique, we get, depending on what resolution we pick, we get this type of segmentation here. And then a nice way to represent images that have been partitioned into regions is the quad tree. The quad tree is a very simple idea. It says basically we want to split the image into 4 quadrants, and if our property is satisfied for everything in a region, we don't need to split that any further. If it's not satisfied, we recursively split that quadrant again into 4 more quadrants and keep going. So potentially a tree like this has a relatively small number of nodes, so it's very concise, and it's also very efficient for searching.